This happened just last night, and honestly, I'm still a little shaken up over it. I will try to retell the tale exactly as it happened, but my fear is sure to have fudged my memory a bit. I work evenings as a dispatcher in a medium-sized Midwestern city. I was driving home at 2 a.m. when I stopped for gas. In retrospect, it was stupid to have stopped at all. The gas station was poorly lit and completely empty of any other customers, but I knew the shady areas of town and this was not usually one of them. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a middle-aged black woman sitting on the curb across the parking lot. It was a cold night and it had just started raining. The woman was not wearing weather-appropriate clothing, so she was drenched. When the woman saw that I was watching her, she called out to me from across the parking lot. My second of many stupid decisions that night was choosing to engage with her. I was worried for her, so I approached her to see what sort of help I could offer. "Hi, beautiful. I am just trying to get home, but no one will help me," she said. "I am trying to get to City A, but the cab ride is $60 and I only have 40. Can you help me?" I don't usually give money to panhandlers, but this woman seemed genuine. The weather was terrible, and my job centers around helping people, so I agreed. I told her I did not have any cash, but if she would come with me inside, I would take some money out of the ATM and give her a few dollars. But the ATM was not working. I apologized and told her there was nothing else I could do for her. She followed me back outside, idly chatting with me as I opened my driver's door to get in, and then she got in my car. I was too shocked to really say anything. I sat staring at her as she buckled herself into the passenger seat. As soon as she got into my car, her demeanor changed entirely. She no longer seemed forlorn as much as she did extremely excited and restless. "Just take me to my aunt's house," she said. "She can give me money." Of course, alarm bells were going off in my head. Although my first instinct was to tell her to get the hell out of my car, my gut told me that would be dangerous. She had already proven to be unpredictable. She seemed to be high, and I did not know if she had any weapons on her. Forcing her out of my vehicle, I thought, had the potential to elicit a violent reaction. "Where are you asking me to take you?" I finally said. "Just start driving and I will tell you where to turn." "No, if you want me to consider driving you somewhere, I need you to tell me where we are going," I said with no real intention of driving her anywhere. "Do not worry, honey. I am not one of the bad black people. I am not going to rob you or nothing. Just drive." "No," I repeated. "What is your aunt's address?" "Okay, it is on Street A." "What is the house number?" As I was asking her questions, she got really agitated. We still had not left the gas station parking lot. I considered getting out of the car and going into the gas station for help, but A, she seemed to know and be friendly with the one attendant that was inside when I tried to get money, and B, I was not about to leave her alone in my car. Finally, she snapped at me and said, "Why are you asking me so many questions? I thought we were friends. You do not trust me. Is it because I'm black?" "I work at a police department," I said. "It is my job to ask these sorts of questions." She flipped the hell out. She started yelling at me about being a snitch, about trying to get her in trouble, just in general losing her mind. At this point, I was more scared than ever. I just wanted her gone, but my instincts still told me asking her to get out of my car would not work. So I decided to take a risk. "I am not a police officer. I just work at a police department. Why don't I take you to Walmart and see if they have an ATM that works?" My idea was to get her out of my car as peacefully as possible, then lose her in the store. She liked my idea and immediately calmed down. I knew that driving off with this woman in my car was incredibly risky, but it seemed like my best option at the time. As we were driving, she kept talking to me. Her thoughts were erratic, bouncing all over the place. It sometimes seemed difficult for her to follow through on a thought. But this is roughly how our conversation went. I am glad we are friends now. I have about 5 or 6 people trying to get me. I am going to come to your work tomorrow so we can go arrest them together. Okay, we can talk about that tomorrow. Tonight you said you're trying to get home. Yes, honey, I'm trying to get to City B. City B? I thought you said you needed to go to City A. Yeah, City A, that's what I meant. That is why the cab ride is $40. It is far away. The cab ride is $40. Yeah, baby. You said you have $40. I do, baby, I have $40, but the cab ride is $60. Silence. Are you sure you cannot take me to my aunt's house? She lives close by on Street B. I thought you said she lived on Street A. No, baby, I meant Street B, but it does not matter because she will not give me money anyway. You sure you cannot just take me to City A? It was terrifyingly obvious that this woman was utterly full of lies because the details of her story were constantly changing. When we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, she finally got out of my car, only after I got out first, and followed me into the store. I told her before we went to find an ATM, I needed to use the restroom. My plan was to call the police from inside a stall, but she followed me into the bathroom. And that is when things got really weird. She grabbed the crook of my arm and whispered into my ear, "If you do not have any money to give me, that is okay. But let me ask you something, sweetie. Do you want to have a little fun?" I told her no as forcefully as I could manage, bolted into a stall and locked the door as fast as I could possibly manage. As soon as I had a barrier between us, I said, "You know, I have some friends at the police department that can probably help you better than I can. I am just going to call them and we can figure this out together." Again, at the mention of the police, she started screaming at me. I just kept reiterating that the police would help her. She snapped at me that she was just going to leave and stormed out of the bathroom. But it was not over. I waited to make sure she was really gone. Sure enough, not 60 seconds after she left, she came back into the bathroom and started banging on the stall door. And she said something that scared me more than anything else. "Hey, come back to your car with me. I left my beer in your car." I blatantly told her no. I said I saw her get into my car and she had absolutely nothing with her other than the clothes on her back. After that, she left the bathroom again and did not come back. I waited a good 5 minutes before exiting the bathroom. I immediately found a manager who called the police for me. Thankfully, I was in a different police jurisdiction from the one I work in, because I was mortified at how entirely stupid I had been the whole night, and would have died of embarrassment if any of my coworkers had responded. The officer who responded took my statement and advised me to be more careful in the future. He said that sometimes panhandlers turn violent, and that just recently there had been a report of a woman who matched my description assaulting a good Samaritan who had stopped to try to help her. I definitely learned a lesson on stranger danger, and I am lucky to have come out unscathed. I am glad my stupidity did not kill me. The next time you try to help a stranger late at night, do not. For some context, I had a really terrible childhood. It was so bad that I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened during those years comes from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family told me about myself in police reports. One of the things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else that contributed to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old. I would sit in her living room while she typed everything I said on her laptop. I didn't have any problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought she was someone I could trust. So I did. 7 years later, when I was 14 years old, I admitted to her that I had tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple factors. My mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, the fact that I never moved on from the horrors of my childhood. At 14, I started wondering why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially since I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get to see a different person, maybe get a different kind of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. My mother just hissed at me to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with Auntie. At the end of these sessions, Auntie would try to defend my mother or make me seem like I was blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons why she was not trying to understand things fully, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me accept it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started asking very specific questions, especially about the topics I just mentioned. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things was because she had known me for almost a decade by then. A year later, she started bringing up the parties I had gone to during our sessions, without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost completely severed, and the worst part of all, which still affects me to this day, was that at the end of each session, Auntie started inviting my mother into the room and telling her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse she was putting me through, said straight to her face while she sat next to me. My grades at school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to end it all on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something I could overdose on, or just something that could push me over the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I barely knew she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hanging clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still picture it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it. When I did, all I saw were a ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so many snapped me out of the state I was in. I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor wondering what the heck these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and my sessions, literally dating back to some of the first sessions I had. I remember feeling sick, so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me with more and more bitter questions. I decided that night that I would only do something rash after I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I faced the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started paying way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance, searching for clues that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That was until I did something that almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but back then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower and I had already packed everything I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out of the house. I didn't even look down at the phone until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place, but even as I got off the bus and kept reading years of texts, nothing incriminating showed itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs and I saw that they called each other extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit on the side of the road and continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching for Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then, and sometimes now I swear I can still feel that same sick feeling. I almost gave up. Almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers, because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name. It was some weird fake one, but when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends. I scrolled down her page for a while until I saw a photo that I had posted of her and my mother years ago. They had literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts, why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said, and why she defended her. I didn't even bother finding a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beaten black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night was, "Who is Auntie really?" And she couldn't even answer. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky opportunity to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He is one of my best friends now. What finally gave me closure in a bittersweet way was clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched the username in the search bar, and it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on Instagram. And suddenly, everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions. Why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her bio. Instead it said, chemistry teacher with over 20 years. I admit that I cried like a baby that night, because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female role models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years have been spent healing from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with new friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees there's something wrong with them. I just wish I had known that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason I was sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. I decided to post about my experience and the slight chance anyone has had a similar experience with therapy becoming messed up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again. Given my pretty busy schedule as a 17-year-old student and the fact that I have household duties to attend to, I don't always have the most flexible time to do everything. Sometimes I have to compromise on timing when something comes up. I'm not sure if this is important, but I am a male. I have a small shorkie named Avi who I dearly love with all my heart. However, the fact that she is only 2 years old and is always bouncing around the house means I have to take her out at least twice a day. She pees a lot on the rugs and my parents scold me, so I have to make sure she can do her dog stuff outside. One particular day, I had to quickly go somewhere far away for a club event, so I had to take the bus because my parents could not drive me that day. It would be fun if the bus schedules coordinated better. Their schedules do not match, and one of the buses came so late that I got home an hour late. At that time, it was already around 9 p.m., and I still had to finish chores and do my homework. I figured that altogether it would take about an hour to finish, so I put off walking Avi and got straight to work. However, I was wrong. I practically finished by 11:30 p.m., and I was dead tired. However, Avi was whining and licking me profusely, so I had to go out and walk her. Getting her leash in my shoes, I went outside and decided to make a few rounds around my neighborhood complex. I usually make my last walk of the day at around 10 p.m. anyway, and this has happened where I walked her really late at night, so it did not bother me at all. Furthermore, there is usually nobody out at this time because most of the people in my neighborhood are elderly, and they are asleep. So at this time, I practically had my guard down and was just aimlessly walking Avi. Now, my complex is shaped like a square and I plan to make rounds around it. Imagine a square where the 4 lines are the major roads. My house is exactly near the bottom left corner. There is a major road near the top side of the square, but other than that, it is just the small roads going through my complex. Within the square, there are small roads and alleyways that I know well, which comes in useful when playing hide and seek with the neighborhood kids. One major factor you have to know is that there are very few streetlights that illuminate the way. The major road is brightly lit, but there are only 2 streetlights in the other complex roads. My house is beside a rather well-maintained streetlight. This becomes important later. So anyway, I was walking Avi rather calmly and without really being fully awake. I was just walking like a zombie. I knew the way well, so it was not a bother for me. Everything went rather well as I made my way up to the major road and all the way to the rightmost road, when I noticed someone in front of me. It was a man wearing a hood and a cap, basically clothes that seemed to conceal himself. I was wearing a blue jacket, jeans, and sneakers. The thing that surprised me the most was that the man was also walking a dog. It looked like a pit bull. I am not great at identifying dog breeds, sorry, but it seemed kind of small to be one. Something you have to know about Avi is that she is very sweet and docile, and she does not bark unless she senses something is wrong or out of place. For example, she would bark when someone is behind the door. She rarely barks, so when she does, I become more alert. Anyway, I know most of the neighborhood dogs because we are a pretty tight-knit community, and I would know their names and appearance. But I have never seen this dog or its owner. Now, looking back, I should have just said hello and gone on my way. But being half asleep, I was not in the right state of mind. Avi obviously gravitated towards the dog and they started playing and scratching and all that. While I was just dragging myself there, Avi literally a few seconds later started barking like crazy. She was growling and barking really loud. Okay, well, I was half asleep, but rest assured I am sure it was quite loud. At the man. He suddenly pulled the pit bull away and just went on his way. I was just like, whatever, until I noticed that he was making glances at me as he shuffled away. I didn't really take notice, but I called out sorry as I tried to restrain Avi. After that, I went on my way. Now, this is where I think it got really creepy. Remember how there are only so many streetlights? Well, most of them aren't maintained well, so they only illuminate a small portion of the area. As I walked down the road, I suddenly had this feeling that I was being watched, but I brushed it off as just my imagination. As I went along and passed under the first streetlight, I saw the same man just standing there looking to the right. I thought I'd go up and apologize about Avi, but as I did, Avi started going maniacal again, so I just went to the other side and waved at him. He then looked my way, and I swear, I had the most chilled feeling go up my spine. I don't know how to describe it, but at that point my instincts kicked in and I ran. Guess what? He gave pursuit. I practically freaked out and just blindly ran. I'm a pretty fast runner because I do cross country, but the season ended long ago and I wasn't exactly in shape. However, the adrenaline just gave me a huge speed boost and I sprinted out of there. Avi runs fast as well, so it wasn't hard for her to run alongside me. At this point, I was on the bottom road running toward my house. But after reading many stories here, the idea of not going to my house seemed like the best course of action. He was still behind me, but I was quite ahead. Instead of going to my house, I immediately turned right into a small playground and alleyway and went in there. I thought I was safe until I remembered that Avi's collar makes a clinging sound whenever she walks, so I practically heard him turn and head toward my direction. Quickly thinking, I picked her up and ran toward an alleyway that led to the main road. This alleyway is notorious for having tall grass. Think Pokemon tall grass. But it didn't matter to me because I was just too scared. I came to the main road and immediately turned toward the leftmost road out of breath. At this point, I was holding Avi in my left hand and took my phone in my right hand to call someone, when I realized it was dead. At that exact moment, I heard a dog barking and running, and I knew it was him because a few seconds later he came behind me. I was really out of breath and felt like collapsing, but I ran anyway. I'm not sure which thread it was in, but it said its best to start screaming and shouting like a madman to draw attention, so that's what I started doing. I don't know who posted it, but you may as well have saved my life because, as I was near the end of the road, he was literally only several paces behind me. A car pulled up. A woman opened her window and started screaming at me. The man literally stopped and ran in the opposite direction. Right at that moment, I was just on the ground, super exhausted, while Avi looked like she really did not care about what happened. The woman who happened to be my neighbor, a middle-aged woman who lives with her elderly mom, got out of the car and started chewing me out for screaming. She said she was driving down the road when she heard screaming and saw me running, so she assumed I was some kind of escaped mental patient. When she saw it was me, she threatened to tell on my parents. I apologized and explained what had just happened, and she was just like, "What the heck?" and apologized for berating me. She then took me home and told my parents, who got super worried. She said, "That was very smart of you to start screaming to draw attention. Even though I might have disturbed the neighborhood, I think that really saved my hide. From that point on, I am never going to walk Avi after 10 p.m. anymore. Creepy running man, let's not meet." So this has been happening for about 1.5 years now. And tonight, something happened that finally made me and my boyfriend realize that I wasn't imagining things. About 1.5 years ago, after living in my apartment for over 5 years, I suddenly started noticing that things would be out of place when I got home from work. Things that almost seemed out of place on purpose, to mess with my OCD. Sometimes I would notice knives that were put back into the knife block the wrong way, or little ornaments that I have around my house being turned to face the wrong way. Sometimes my clothes were hung up in my closet the wrong way. Little things like that where I would feel something was off, but there was no way to prove it. And in all honesty, it could have just been me being absent-minded when putting things away. After a couple of months of things randomly being out of place and always having that creeped out feeling, things stopped going out of place. I put it to the back of my mind, stopped being so paranoid, and moved on with my life. That is until about 2 weeks ago. For the past couple of weeks, my cat has seriously been trying to tell me something when I get home from work. Any of you who have a cat will know that exact meow. It's not an "I'm hungry" or an "I'm pissed because you have been at work all day" meow, but an "oh my god, you will never believe what happened" type of meow, if that makes sense. I didn't really think anything of it because cats can be jerks sometimes, and I just assumed he was bored and wanting to complain. The other day when I came home from work, I noticed a pair of balled-up socks that do not belong to me sitting on my bedroom floor. My boyfriend came over the next night, and I told him he had left a pair of his socks here when he had stayed over on the weekend. He looked at the socks and said that they were not his. My heart sank and so did his. We both knew that someone had been coming into my house again, and that I probably wasn't imagining it the first time. A few days later, I came home from work and found a bag from a lingerie store on top of my couch. It was empty. This bag had come from inside my house, as I had just bought a bathing suit from that store a couple of weeks prior, and the receipt for that was in the bag. At first, I thought my cat might have dragged it there, but upon inspecting the bag, there were no teeth marks. Also, my cat couldn't have opened my closet door and gone into the paper and cardboard recycling that I keep in there on the top shelf. The final, and perhaps the most unsettling thing happened tonight. My boyfriend met me after work and we went out for dinner. We went back to my apartment afterwards and I went to unlock my door and noticed that it was already unlocked. Locking the door when I leave my house is the one thing that I am most OCD about. I don't just double and triple check it. I quadruple check it. It is not just a habit I have, but something deeply ingrained into me. Everyone who knows me knows this about me, as I even do it to their doors. I have to check 4 times or I get an icky feeling. Even my boyfriend was on red alert when he noticed my door was unlocked. We entered my house and I was checking to see if anything was out of place. He ran to the sliding glass door and tugged it, and it opened right up. I never leave that door unlocked. He witnessed me lock it on Sunday when I closed the door because it was getting too cold. He saw me check it 4 times. I have not opened it since then. We are both convinced somebody has been in my house. Whoever has been coming in somehow has a key. The fact that they left the sliding door unlocked makes me think that maybe they are planning to come back with ill intentions. If they have a key, why would they need to unlock the sliding door? Unless they don't want to be identified by the security cameras at the front door of my building. Either way, I have already ordered a security system, but unfortunately it is not going to arrive for a few days. Any suggestions on anything I can do in the meantime to keep safe? Also, what do you guys think? Am I just being paranoid, or should I go with my gut on this one? Update. I changed my locks the other day and set up my security cameras. So far, nothing else has happened, and I haven't caught anything on the security cameras other than my cat doing his thing during the day when I'm gone. My landlord got back to me about the security footage from the front door and said that the only strangers she saw were buzzed into the building by residents, so no weirdos or previous tenants with keys. The police are still patrolling my neighborhood quite often, which definitely makes me feel more secure. Thank you all for your responses, kind words, and advice. I am at work right now, so it is hard for me to respond to everything, but I just wanted to thank you and update you all. I called the police this morning and talked to an officer who basically told me that, for right now, there is nothing really that they can do unless this escalates. But he did say that I was right to call so that they are aware something might be happening. He also said that getting security cameras is a good idea, as well as getting my landlord to change the locks. He said that they will send a patrol car down my street every once in a while to make sure there is nobody lurking about. Before anyone says it, I'm a woman in my early 20s who lives alone in a crappy apartment in a bad neighborhood in a small college town. I know now that this was a horrible mistake and I wish I could get out of my lease because I would move out immediately. I didn't realize how bad it was when I first visited the complex. It was a sunny day in February. Kids were out playing and people were walking their dogs. The building was motel style, a little rundown looking, but the rent was cheap and it was close to my work. Fast forward past several months of ordinary apartment living, I started noticing a working class looking, middle-aged white man who definitely did not live there hanging around at all hours. He drove a fairly plain but older looking black Mercury Sable sedan, and he always, absolutely always tried to talk to me. Never anything rude or anything, but he would come out of nowhere and try to make friendly small talk, as though he was just one of the neighbors. He overheard one of my neighbors calling me by my name and started doing the same, as if he knew me. That's when I started to get really creeped out by this man. Around mid-April, after he had approached me around 10 p.m., I flashed a can of mace at him and told him to screw off. He put his hands up and looked surprised, backing away slowly. I instantly had a weird feeling that I had made a mistake, so I apologized and carefully went upstairs to my apartment. He watched me the whole way, but I chalked it up to him being freaked out by the fact that I had just threatened him. I didn't see him again for a while, and that made me second-guess myself. Was this guy really a creep? Had I thwarted a creep? About 3 weeks later, I heard a knock on my door around 7 p.m., just moments after I had come home from work. I didn't think anything of it. Probably a lost guest. That's when I heard my name through the door, followed by, "It's management, open up, the ceiling is leaking downstairs and I need to check your plumbing." It was that man. I didn't say anything. I turned off the lights. Thank God I live on the 3rd floor so I don't have accessible windows. I called the cops. They came over, made a huge to-do with lights and sirens, the whole bit. They came back saying they couldn't find the man or his car. Well, no kidding, buddy, you didn't exactly sneak up on him. I didn't hear or see that man again, but according to a friendly neighbor, the only person in my building I really knew, a lot of people had seen him around and many found him creepy. He had pulled a similar crap on a woman on the 1st floor, calling her name and following her to her apartment. She called the leasing office, who called the cops, and they escorted him off the premises and barred him from the property. So we figured that would at least deter him. Fast forward a few weeks later to July. I was out of town for the weekend of the 4th when I got a call from management saying they had come to perform a safety check on me because of a concern from a neighbor and found that my apartment had been broken into. I assured them that I was fine, requested that they make sure to secure the place, and told them I would be home on Sunday to assess things. I chalked the whole safety check thing up to someone probably just having seen the burglar or burglars. I ended up coming back to a really bizarre situation. The place had been ransacked, but nothing was missing except for the contents of my desk drawer with my stuff for my taxes, a copy of my lease and other similar paperwork, and a picture of me and my mom off the refrigerator, which I had chalked up to just getting knocked off and falling under the fridge. A few weeks later, I ran into the friendly neighbor again and he weirdly expressed surprise to see me, casually asking if I had heard what happened. Well, duh, I heard what happened. It was my apartment that got broken into. After some confusion, and quickly realizing we were talking about two entirely different things, I explained what happened to my apartment. He had no idea that it happened, but he suddenly looked like he was about to crap himself before beginning to speak, his tone obviously one of sudden distress. Apparently, on the 5th of July around midnight, some woman was running around the complex screaming and banging on doors for help because an old white man in a black sedan was stalking her. Nobody opened their door because it's a crummy neighborhood, but somebody called the cops. When they got there, they found a part of a weave on the sidewalk next to the parking lot, but nobody could find the woman or the man or his car. By that point, everyone knew about him and suspected him. Some nosy person trying to help the police found a picture in the parking lot. Friendly neighbor said he saw it himself, that it was a picture of me with a middle-aged woman. That's why they called management. That's why they requested a safety check on me. I too suddenly felt like I was about to crap myself, and have felt ridiculously uncomfortable in my apartment and around my complex ever since. I feel like I'm being watched, stalked, followed. All of this stuff that's happened is just too bizarre to be a coincidence. I can barely stand to leave my bedroom. I've been too afraid to even take my trash out. So creepy guy who's clearly been stalking me probably broke into my apartment, likely now has all of my personal information, and allegedly kidnapped a woman. Let's not meet again. When I was around 22 years old, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place. At that time, I was in Harlan, Iowa. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined me. I believe there were 4 of us total. 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and was watching the TV in the hotel breakfast area. There was also a guy nearby. When he looked at me, I said good morning, as I do wherever I go, just to be friendly. He said it back and we had a polite exchange. Something you would do with a stranger you never expected to see again. He mentioned he was staying there with his team for a construction job. As I was leaving, I said something casual like, "Have a good one, see you later." He said something like, "We could hang out later." I didn't think anything of it and just brushed it off like, "Yeah, maybe." I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but since I didn't start work until 11 a.m., we usually worked from around 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., depending on the size of the church. I decided to take a nap because I hadn't slept well the night before. While lying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls on the room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that at all, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody answered. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I walked out of my room and saw the guy standing in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking much of it. He asked where I was going and I said I had to go to work. My friend, the female photographer, showed up and I went with her to her car since I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about the strange phone calls and she said she had received some as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were chances of tornadoes, so we were keeping an eye on the weather and staying close to each other. Eventually, I went to my room for the night and heard a knock on the door. I didn't really want to answer it, but I did, cracking the door open to see who it was. It was the guy. He talked about how I had said we could hang out, and I told him I was too tired after working all day and needed to sleep. I shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still the night, but I recall him knocking again and I wouldn't answer. I pretended to be either out or sleeping. I called my mom and started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I almost acted like I wasn't when speaking with her. Suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second, I need to check something." I tiptoed as quietly as possible over to my room door and looked out the peephole. I saw him. Then I saw him turn his head to the door, as if he was listening for something. My heart started to race. I saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes indents for the doors, creating a little nook in the hallway? Well, he moved to the side where the wall jutted out. I think he thought he was hiding because he leaned his head around the corner of the jut-out portion as if he was listening. I walked to the furthest side of my room quietly and whispered to my mom about how scared I was. I called the front desk to complain just like my mom suggested. I can't remember if I also texted or called my friend, but she complained to the front desk as well about the strange phone calls she had received. Eventually, we were given new rooms and the construction group manager was told about one of his guys. That creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they said if we needed to stay with them, we could. They were very nice, but still strangers to me, and I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him after that because I didn't see him again. I was a little jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room, and I didn't. But it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said. One time, I met this guy in my poetry class. We will call him Wayland to protect his privacy. Wayland and I became pretty close because we were always put into critique groups together in our class. I talked to him and he seemed like a pretty normal guy. I went to his apartment a few times to hang out or play video games. He was obsessed with his dog, so whenever we went anywhere, he usually took his dog with him. That was the only strange thing about his personality that I could see. But eventually he started talking about this girl named Michelle, who was an angel he was trying to find. At first, I thought he was talking about a girl who was like an angel. But no, he was looking for someone he loved who he literally believed was an angel. And that was the first weird thing I noticed about him. But I tried to keep an open mind, as a lot of paranormal stuff has happened to me in my life. A few months into our friendship, he ended up taking me out to this lake and we walked along the shore. It was the one time he didn't bring his dog. For some reason, the entire trip I was getting this really bad vibe like I needed to get out of there. So as we were walking along the beach, he told me a story about how he is a demon, or he used to be until he was incarnated into his current form. Just to clarify, I do not personally believe that this individual was a demon. I think he was just a seriously disturbed young man. But but I am recounting things as he told them to me so you can get a better idea of what took place. He told this story about a doll that used to levitate and do weird things in his mom's attic or something, and how the doll used to move on its own and talk to him. Apparently, the doll told him who to be angry at and who he should hurt if they got on his bad side, among other creepy things. At this point, I was royally freaked out. I told him that his story was interesting and I wish I could listen to more, but my mom called and I needed to get home. He just gave me this confused look and then said he would take me back to my house. Fortunately, he did take me home, and after that day, I avoided him in class and wouldn't hang out with him after school. I always made excuses like I needed to do homework or something, and that is when he started calling me 50 times a day, leaving hundreds of messages on my phone. He even showed up at my job a few times to talk to me. And the creepy thing about this is that I never told him where I worked. I was polite each time but didn't encourage him too much. He would show up at other places I went to, coincidentally, but I knew they weren't coincidences. So yeah, he was pretty much hardcore creeping, and it was pretty scary. After I avoided him for a while, he eventually got the hint that I didn't want him around and left me alone. But then a few weeks later, I found out that my friend was dating him. He had never met my friend before, and he claimed that he had just happened to find her on a dating site. I truly believe he looked into who my friends were so he could latch onto them and keep an eye on me. It was basically another way for him to stalk me. I tried to tell my friend not to get too involved because of his weird behavior. I mentioned that he called me like 50 times and left a whole bunch of creepy messages on my phone. But she just thought I was being paranoid, and she went out with him anyway. Fortunately, she got a bad vibe from him after a few dates and broke up with him. He also started calling her a bunch of times, but eventually gave up when it looked like she wouldn't change her mind. A few weeks after the incident, I woke up to the sound of someone walking outside of my bedroom window. It was a bit unnerving, but I figured that it might be one of the neighbors, so I didn't think anything of it and I went back to bed. I investigated the area outside of my window the next day and saw distinct footsteps and something that looked like a knife left by the footprints. By that time, my poetry class was over, and I had really no other contact with Wayland, so I didn't know if he lived in the same place. But I let my mom know, and we kept a watch out for a couple weeks. That was the last time I was bothered by anything like that. I don't know where Wayland is these days or if it was him outside of my window that night, but I hope that we never meet again. This is an ongoing situation, and I'm not sure what to do about it yet. My house sits quite far back from the road, around 150 feet or so, maybe a little further. Between the entrance to my driveway and my front porch, I have 3 vehicles parked that would obscure the view from anyone walking or driving by. I live in the country on a side road with no stores or anything nearby, so someone getting lost looking for an address out here is unlikely. There's really no reason to be on this road at all unless you know someone, and while the road is a couple of miles long, there are only 6 houses along it because it's an agricultural area with wide gaps between neighbors. No streetlights. It's literally pitch black out here at night. About a week ago, I was waiting for the mom of the boy I babysit to come pick him up. It was still light out, around 7 p.m., so it was just starting to get dimmer. When his mom arrived to pick him up, she and I were talking outside the car for a minute while he finished a match on Apex. That's when we both heard a noise that sounded like someone trying to stifle a cough from the kiwi orchard that borders my house. I thought it was just her kid. He tries to jump scare me all the time lately. Stealth is definitely not his strong suit, so coughing or laughing when he's setting up to scare me is pretty common, so I paid zero attention to it at the time. A couple of minutes later, he came running out of my front door, and they left. I didn't even realize until later that the coughing from the orchard was weird, but at the time it didn't even register. Later that night, I was sitting outside on my front porch smoking. It was sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. My lighter was dead, so I lit my cigarette on my stove and then ran outside with it. I was sitting with my back to the road, smoking. I didn't have my porch lights on and my phone was on the dimmest setting because I didn't want to attract mosquitoes. About halfway through my cigarette, a man spoke up from somewhere nearby and asked if he could have a cigarette. I was so startled that I froze, literally thinking an ad had popped up on my phone or something. Then he said it again, and I turned around. He was right behind me. This dude was tall, like really tall, somewhere between 6'3" and 6'6". He had a beard, long hair, and was barefoot, wearing maybe blue or gray pants, no shirt, and a long coat or robe. It was hard to tell in the dark, even though I turned on my phone's flashlight. He was like 5 or 6 feet away from me at the most. 2 steps, and he could have had his hands on me. I didn't know what to do or say. My heart was pounding, so I just pulled out my pack. When he started to step forward, I said, "No, stop, you don't need to do that here," and tossed him the whole pack. He stopped when I told him to and put his hands up to chest height, palms out. He said, "That was a good idea to toss it," and just stood there for a second. I literally didn't know what to say. Before I had the chance, he backed away, walking backwards toward the road until I could no longer see him. I didn't hear any footsteps after that, so I'm not sure if he kept walking or just stopped. I still have no clue how the hell he got so close to me or where he came from. How did he even know I was smoking? He couldn't have heard me light it because I lit it inside. Maybe he was nearby enough to smell it, I guess. What's even weirder is I've never seen him around here before. Since then, I've heard noises around my house every night. Not right up on my house or anywhere where my cameras would catch anything, but noises near the orchard by the canal. Too close for comfort. I'm not sure what to do. I asked the sheriff's office if they could patrol out here, but they're almost never around this area. And I can't exactly report him if I don't know where he is, or if he's doing anything that can be reported. It really freaked me out, and I have a bad feeling about the guy, but I don't know what I can actually do about it. This happened years ago, but it's a story I still tell friends whenever I get the chance. This time, I was the baddie in someone's Let's Not Meet story. When I was in high school, I dated a very close friend named Ivory. After we broke up, we stayed good friends. When Ivory's birthday rolled around, she invited me to her party. The first part of the evening was at a restaurant in a nearby town I'd never been to. Afterward, everyone was heading to a mutual friend's house for drinks and relaxation. One of Ivory's friends was volunteering to drive us all to the restaurant, but I'd heard plenty of stories about her terrible driving, so I decided to chauffeur myself in my luxurious minivan. Yes, I drove a minivan in high school. Ivory's friend said 7 p.m., so at exactly 7, my black ass rolled into the parking lot. I called Ivory to let her know I'd arrived, but they were just leaving. I overheard Ivory say, "If you tell him to be there at 7, he's there at 7. That gave me about half an hour of boredom before company arrived. Being the introvert I am, I didn't go inside to wait like a normal person. Instead, I decided to listen to whatever angsty music I was into at the time, probably Heartbeat by Childish Gambino. I also didn't park right near the restaurant. The restaurant was in a plaza, a strip mall with several stores on either side. For some reason, I thought it'd be weird for people to see me just sitting there like a waiting weirdo. So I parked at the far end by a supermarket. I could still see the restaurant and there were fewer cars on this side. 5 minutes passed. I was rapidly switching songs. 10 minutes went by. I was bored out of my mind. Suddenly, the hum of a text came through. Ivory had messaged me, a brief reprieve from boredom. As I typed my reply, I got that weird feeling. You know, that feeling when someone is watching you like you can almost hear their eyes. I looked up from the glow of my phone into the dark parking lot. What I saw was a family of 4, a woman, her husband, and 2 kids, all staring at me intensely. The woman stood in front of her kids with her hands outstretched, like she was shielding them from some invisible danger. The look on her face was pure horror, like someone just asked if Pepsi was okay. I've never seen such panic, and I once had to physically intervene to stop an armed attacker. Slowly, the woman crept forward, her family inching behind her. She moved toward the driver's side, closer to me with every step, and her terror grew. I was starting to panic myself. Why was this family glaring at me like I was a monster? Without warning, the husband said something I couldn't hear through the glass. He pointed to my left. We all followed his hand and saw an almost identical car 5 spots over. The mother threw her head back and laughed, unlocking her own car. Apparently, this family had left the grocery store only to find a black teen dressed in all black sitting in their car, maintaining eye contact for what felt like an eternity. My perplexed expression probably looked sinister in the dim light. I'm just glad they realized their mistake before anyone got hurt or the cops got called. So, to the family who thought I was stealing their car that night, we can meet. I promise I'm a nice guy who doesn't steal cars.